Good evening, everybody. Welcome, everyone, to episode 579 of Line Upon Line. Tonight, we're going to look at the value of the land, Sabbath, and the Jubilee year. So, to start us out, we have Stan and Mike and Dr. Ricks. If you would start us off, that would be wonderful.
Good to see you, Ken, and everybody. Today, we're going to do some Reagan groaners. Now, we got to remember, Reagan is a lot more colorful and a better storyteller than I am, although we're both good looking. Anyway, the first one is, this is when Reagan was governor of California. And on the 9 state campuses, they were rioting big time. And Reagan said, well, why don't you come and see me in the governor's mansion? So they came over, and a bunch of radicals came in, barefoot, torn T-shirts, ratty hair, and let's say the hygiene could have been better. And so they said to him, you know, you're old, Governor. You can't understand our generation because we grew up in a world of instant communications and electronics. You old folks don't understand us. He paused and he thought, usually I always think of what I should have said after it's too late. But he said, you know, I was born in a generation that invented all that stuff. That spoiled you, brats.
Yeah.
Anyway, the next one is, they announced there was a dog lost in the state. The dog had 3 legs. Both ears were chewed off by raccoons. And he had been sterilized. And he answers to the name Lucky. Okay, the next Reagan groaner was, you got to imagine Ronald Reagan saying this. He made a big story of it. There was an old preacher advising a younger preacher. He says, you know, the problem is our audiences go to sleep on us. So here's what I do when I want to wake them up. The young preacher's thinking, what does he know? He's only half listening. He says, what I do is I say, look, last night there was a woman married to another man in my arms. All of a sudden the audience wakes up. And then he says, oh, and it turned out she was my mom. But now they're awake. So the younger preacher's preaching along. People are starting to fall off and go to sleep. And he says to himself, I'll try that technique. He says, last night there was a woman married to another man in my arms. Then he pauses and he says, but I can't remember her name.
That did not help.
He wasn't listening. Now, here's the pièce de résistance. This is a famous Reagan joke. There was a big Democratic rally. Now, in front of the Democratic rally were several boys selling several baskets full of kittens. And they sold a bunch, but not all of them. A reporter noticed it. A few weeks later, and he said they were Democratic kittens, perfect for them. A few weeks later, the same boys were out in front of the Republican rally, and they were selling the same kittens. They were saying, no, these are Republican kittens. The reporter says, wait a minute. You just sold those same kittens a few weeks ago as Democratic kittens. How can you now say they are Republican kittens? He says, now they have their eyes open. You got to imagine Ronald Reagan telling that joke. It was a riot. Okay. And I just love that their eyes are open now. Well, at any rate, value of the land, Sabbath, and basically you could make the argument that the infrastructure for good health starts in the land and the soil, because that produces the food, which makes us healthy. By the way, do you know that a lot of experts believe that many vitamins and minerals our body is built to get them out of fruits and vegetables and grains. But artificial vitamins may not be utilized by our bodies.
Yeah, there's certain nutrients, and I think it's certain minerals and things that if most of the time when you get them from a vitamin pill, they just pass on through. They have to be treated a certain way. I think it's chelation. If they're chelated or chelated, however you pronounce it, then your body can utilize some of it. But there's no substitute for getting them out of the food you eat.
Yeah,
the best way to get them is out of the food you eat.
I did see a study about that, about all of these vitamins that people buy in these bottles, little hard pills of vitamins and minerals, and the point of the whole study was that they just go right through, and they're basically not even being utilized at all because it's a big waste of money.
And some vitamins, if you take too much of them, can be detrimental. And I don't remember the list, but it might have been one of the D vitamins and E vitamins. And what was it? B1, and whatever it was, vitamins that you think you can't get too much of, but apparently you can.
There was a guy.
Scared.
There was a guy years ago. If you remember, there was this like silver. What was it called? The silver. People would. Oh shoot! What was it? Anyway, they did this thing where they would get silver. What?
Yeah, they'd make a silver solution of some kind.
Something.
I remember that.
Well, there was a big thing 20 years ago. Everybody was. This guy did it so much, he turned his skin blue. His skin turned blue.
I actually saw that once.
Yeah, so people, and I know one guy, he was taking everything. He was doing all the stuff that he was doing the silver whatever and doing all the vitamins and the drugs, and he was running. He started jogging. He had a treadmill, dropped graveyard dead on a treadmill. Because he just overdid everything. He figured if some was good, more was better, and it just killed him.
By the way, there are now experts who are now saying jogging by itself is not enough, and you can do too much of it. You need, I don't remember the details, but you need strength exercises and certain other kinds of exercises, because jogging, especially as you get older, wears down your joints, and it doesn't do everything you need.
I tell people if you get older, you're better off on a bicycle than you are jogging because of your joints and your back and everything else.
Yeah.
So
unless you fall off.
Well, there's that.
Yeah, that's true.
It's funny because I own a bicycle because some guy bought it and he was attacked by a goose on the bike. The goose knocked him off the bike, and he just bought the bike and he gave me the bike. I don't want this thing. See, I'd have gave someone the goose. The problem was the goose, not the bike.
That's funny.
But I know a couple of people my age that used to ride, have ridden a lot, and they don't ride anymore because they're afraid of falling.
Oh, you get certain.
They don't have that. They don't have that confidence.
Yeah.
I mean, one guy's ridden across 5 states, and he's afraid to get on his bike now.
You can get 3-wheel bikes. Those are real stable.
Yeah. My wife has one.
Yeah. My wife has one too. She don't ride it, but she has one.
Yeah. That's the problem, isn't it?
The point is that food is the best source of nutrition, vitamins.
Yes.
And people can argue about which foods, yogurt, it gets complicated, but the more natural it is, direct from the soil, the better the soil, the better for us.
Yeah.
So that's something. Therefore, you can argue the land Sabbath, like everything else God did, is for our benefit. Kim, would you put up the first scripture, please?
And he said to them, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath.
I would argue the land Sabbath was made for man. In other words, God doesn't need the land Sabbath. Not really. I mean, I know it's written in something to do for him, but really, our land and our soil needs it. God is just fine.
Well, when you look at the Sabbath day, I've heard so many preachers get to this point. People will ask questions about the Sabbath day, and I just heard one this week, and he did a tap dance around the fact that the Sabbath day was created at creation. Was it the same Sabbath that they kept in, Leviticus and Deuteronomy that commanded, that were in the commandments of God to keep the Sabbath day? And this guy, he did a maneuver to try to say that it wasn't the same day. And yet, within the Ten Commandments, it says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. But the point I wanted to make was what is so fascinating is God made a day specifically for you. When you think about it like that, he made this day specifically for you, and he made it for a specific reason, purpose. And that was, he knew that if without it, we would not stop. We would not quit. We would not pause. And he gave us this day because he knew that we needed, to be rejuvenated, and we needed to be renewed. And it leads right into this subject about the land Sabbath. He knew if we didn't have this regulation against the land, that we would till and over spoil the land because of our greed.
Yeah. Like we've done corn today.
Like you did what?
Like we've done corn today.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And this may be something that no one's an expert on. There are scientists who are experts, but I know that we can compensate for artificial nitrogen and a bunch of other stuff. While that's true, I'll bet you there are subtle differences between, rain puts natural nitrogen in the soil, and crop rotation does things for soil better than artificial. And I bet it may be subtle, but letting the land rest is better than dumping tons of chemicals on it.
Yeah. They're trying to put back everything that, that they just keep dragging out. They don't want to waste anything. I mean, we're in such a society where everything, we try to bleed everything out of every drop of assets we have. I mean, it's more efficient, or it's this or that, but we lose something when we do that sort of stuff.
Interesting. They claim that corn syrup is not as good for you as regular cane sugar, and therefore Kennedy has helped talk Coke out of using corn syrup. If that's true, maybe there's a reason why the corn is not as nutritious as it should be. Nutritious as it should be.
It's been modified a lot to make petrol fuel. Corn has.
And some of the stuff they use as fertilizer, you don't even want to know what's in it.
Yeah.
There's a weed killer that a guy was going to sell me. It's broadleaf, and I had a little place, and I was trying to raise some hay and stuff, and I was using fertilizer, trying to pump it up. And if I'd used it on it, it would grow, but cattle cannot eat that for the next 2 years.
Wow.
Wow.
That's how much poison goes into whatever that stuff was.
Wow.
Yeah, we're spraying that stuff by the,
Hundreds
millions
of
of gallons
Tons.
over land, and by airplanes, spraying it out, and it's over and over again. There was some farmland down here in East Texas when I was growing up that had been farmed so much that it was basically like sand in an hourglass. That was all that's left.
Mm-hmm.
There was no color to it. It was just, they had been farmed over and over and over again, year after year after year, and it was, modified, with the fertilizers. They would plant the seeds and put all these fertilizers and all these nutrients in the soil, and it basically is just there to hold the plant up, because it really didn't have any any nutrients that it got was probably from rain, but because the soil was just, there was nothing left.
No organic life in it.
No.
Now you can go ahead. I'm sorry,
Ken.
I didn't mean to interrupt.
Well, I was just going to say they talk about the soil having like a biosphere within the soil. These nutrients and all these organisms grow, and it's sort of a miniature biosphere of these organisms that grow and cause decomposition, and it causes things to be broken down so that the plants, it's good for the plants, it's good for the filtration, it's good for holding, erosion from taking place. And we just erode all that away by the continual planting year after year without allowing the soil to recover.
When I was in school, I was in vocational agriculture and the future farmers. And one of the things we did in future farmers was something called land judging. You can actually smell the dirt when it's good for growing stuff. You can
Yeah.
tell that, you can see it, and you can
Yeah.
smell the difference between good dirt and inert dirt. And it's quite remarkable, and you can tell just by turning over a shovelful what you're going to grow there and what you're not going to grow.
Yeah.
Ken, would you read the next scripture, 1 Corinthians 3:16, please? I'm making a principle here. Just want to make it.
All right. Do you not know that you are the temple of God and that the Spirit of God dwells in you? If anyone defiles the temple of God, God will destroy him, for the temple of God is holy. Which temple are you?
Now, that's not
Or
just
you
our
are.
spirit, that's also our body. Would you read the next scripture? I want to make the point, it's not just your spirit, it's also your body he's referring to.
He that is joined to a harlot is one body. Question. For the twain saith shall become one flesh. But he that is joined unto the Lord is one spirit. Flee fornication. Every sin that a man doeth is without the body, but he that committeth fornication sinneth against his own body. Or know ye not that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit?
What he's saying is, and by the way, in Corinth, there were plenty of prostitutes. You read about Corinth, you wouldn't believe the sexual license that went on there, more than what most of us are used to seeing. Temple prostitutes, all kinds of stuff. So it was really a real threat there. He's saying that if you commit a sin with your body, like messing with a temple prostitute, it's a double sin. It's a spiritual sin, but it's also a physical sin.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty dire warning there, where he says, that God would, the warning that he has, that whoever defiles the temple of God, God will destroy him. That's serious business. I mean, you read over that pretty quickly, but when you think of that and think of it in light of the subject of your body and how we're supposed to take care of it and have, reasonably good diet and get exercise and take care of your body, is, I've always used the analogy as, he says it's the temple of the Holy Spirit, or, you are the temple of God. Your body is the temple of God because his Spirit dwells in you. You wouldn't take, some of the garbage that we have in our world today into the real temple of God and parade it around as if it was okay. It's sort of the same thing that he uses that analogy, as if you would drag your, the wickedness of this world and the slop and the filth of it into the very throne room of God. I mean, think about it. Same goes for your body and your mind. You need to protect your mind and your heart and your body from those things, that God has established you as a vessel of his Spirit, and we don't want to corrupt it with those things from the outside world.
Yeah.
You could even go, this might be pushing it, but I could say, if you drink like 6 Cokes or Pepsi a day with all the sugar they've got, unless you're living an active life, like working on a farm or construction, where you're burning a lot of carbs, if you're not doing that, that much sugar is harming your body. I know that's not something people think of. You're telling me I can't drink all the Coke I want? Yes, that's what I believe now. And you may not feel it for a while, but it will eventually catch up with you.
Our body is very resilient. It is a remarkable organism. It can fight off things that we wouldn't think it could fight off. It is continually protecting and defending us against bombarding diseases. And some people, can't resist the diseases. We don't know why. And it could be that our diet, within our diet, or hereditary or other things. But, our body is a complex organism that really fights off all of these diseases. And if we give it the best shot, it can really keep us safe from a lot of this stuff. But when we take away all of its defense mechanism by the things that we eat and the staying up too late or whatever, the things we ingest, drugs, alcohol, whatever, all of those things tend to lead to a breaking down of some of those defense mechanisms in our body.
Yeah, particularly sugar. Because that just goes straight to fat. And it has other effects. There was a book a number of years ago called Sugar, and it talked about the history of sugar and how it all came about and stuff. And it talked about the Arabs, as a matter of fact, that they were fierce warriors. The whole world was afraid of them. And then they introduced sugar, and they started eating sugar, and they were concerned about this or that, and they lost that edge. I don't know if it's true or not, but look at the obesity in this country.
I heard something else.
I don't want to talk about that very much, but
I heard something else interesting. They said that this goes back to the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. The pagans had to eat whole wheat, but the lord of the manor and the overlords and the upper classes, they ate the refined flour. And guess who had the most health problems? The upper classes, not the poor pagans that had to eat whole wheat and the more rougher foods. And you would have never thought that, would you?
Yes.
So it's just an interesting thing to think about, but it's a spiritual matter, and we have to protect our soil because that protects our food, which nourishes our body.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, I'm realistic too. I know that in the real world, there's only so much you can do to eat healthy. So I'm not a fanatic, but I still say you should try to be like you were saying, Stan, be reasonable in your diet.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is against you. If you try to go, organic, you try to eat real healthy and you want to eat fruits and vegetables, it's twice as expensive as eating the stuff that they lay out there for us to eat, canned goods and things that are processed. It's like I said, it's more expensive. It's hard to obtain at times, and it's a little more difficult to prepare. It's like everything's against the modern. I want it now, and I want it. I want to eat dinner in 10 minutes and be done. And we rush through life so quickly. We don't take time to prepare food that we did maybe 40, 50, 60, 70 years ago, and so we eat a lot of processed stuff it may not be the greatest thing for us.
Yeah. Well, they talk about cancer, and I think about how my father grew up. Subsistence farm, they grew everything. They made everything.
Yeah.
They snapped beans on the porch.
Yeah.
When's the last time that's happened?
Mhm.
Not in recent memory.
I remember my grandparents snapping peas.
Well,
Never
sure.
mind. But that was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago. They were eating natural food, see?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when I was, I don't know, junior high or something like that, I knew one person that had cancer. All I ever heard about, one person.
Yeah.
And now it's like everywhere.
Yeah.
There's probably only so much you can do. But the more raw food you eat, raw fruit, vegetables. We saw this lady on YouTube. She claims that she makes her own bread every other day or so. She grinds her own grain, puts natural ingredients in it. You have to see the program. But I can imagine that house smells great when she bakes bread.
Yeah.
And she says it's hard to buy bread in the grocery stores that they don't put a lot of preservatives, conditioners, and she went on, but you get the point. We're not getting. They took time in the old days to make food. We can't do that anymore.
Right.
They say to buy your food from the outside of the grocery store. In other words, around, the meats, the cheeses, the fruits, the vegetables. Stay away from the gondolas in the middle of the grocery store. Stay away from all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ken, would you read Leviticus 25:2, please?
Speak when you come into the land I give you, then the land shall keep a Sabbath to the Lord. 6 years you shall sow your field, and 6 years you shall prune your vineyard, gather its fruit. But in the 7th year there shall be a Sabbath of solemn rest for the land, a Sabbath to the Lord. You shall neither sow your field nor prune.
One of my local church members says in his area, it's a big farming area, the agriculture department, at least for his county, is giving subsidies for cotton. So a lot of farmers switch to cotton. And it would appear that agri-science has discovered that you have to rotate crops, let part of your field rest, and the federal government incentivizes some of that. And the point I would make is, how did Moses know what it took agri-science centuries in the future to discover? How did Moses know that 1300 BC?
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, you think about, God created the earth and the heavens, and then he rested. It says he rested the 7th day. We know the letter 7, or the number 7, I should say, it's like perfection. It's spiritual perfection, if you will, ultimately. But 7 is the number of perfection. God said it was all good. It was all perfect. Everything he did was perfect. And the Sabbath day rounded out that perfect harmony that he had with creation. And he gave that to us as an example as well. And so here again, we find in the land, if farmers and people that grow crops would do this, they would find a tremendous benefit. And they'd say, oh, well, I couldn't go a whole year without producing crops. I'd lose everything I had. Well, maybe, society's brought us to that place, but I think we'll see here in a moment that God actually made provision for that.
And some farmers do let part of their land rest on some kind of rotating basis, but I don't understand it, but apparently some of that is done. At least that's something. And that's because agri-science has found it's good for the soil.
Well, the complete repetition of those crops over and over and over and over again, like Ken said about corn. I mean, Mike said about corn. It creates this environment for this fungus and stuff that grow, and it's never eliminated because it's there every year. And also the repetition of predatory insects and things like that can grow in the soil that can't be weeded out. I mean, they just reoccur every year, and it's just devastating to the crop. So then they have to spray insecticides to keep those from, at bay.
And it always pulls the same mineral out of the soil.
Yes.
So the soil becomes deficit in that mineral.
Then you got to put the mineral back.
And I think it's Mexico will not accept corn shipped from the United States because it's so bad.
Some countries will not take it.
It's just like in Europe. I don't think we can ship cattle to Europe because we shoot it all full of stuff, and they just have organic cows over there.
Yeah.
You've probably seen the picture of, for instance, hamburger meat. You look at natural ground hamburger meat right beside store-bought hamburger meat, and it looks completely different. One of the things I was thinking about before the program tonight was that during the days of King David, he killed a bear and he killed a lion right there in Jerusalem, in that area. And now it looks like a desert over there. It's just completely.
Sure.
So it was heavily foraged, heavily forested probably, and had had a lot more wilderness type environment and overgrowth and places for animals to live and to inhabit. And man just devastates as they go along. They never give anything back to the soil, and you look at the Sahara Desert. I mean, is that a result of centuries and millennia of man? Because eventually it leads to erosion of that topsoil, that very thin layer. It's almost like the atmosphere above the earth. It's very thin
Right.
protective layer, and it eventually just turns into a desert. And then there's no absorption of heat, there's no filtration of water, and just there are a lot of things that can be added to the problem, and then you end
Right.
up with a useless piece of wilderness.
You could look at the Dust Bowls out west.
Yeah. And in Oklahoma back in the 30s, they tilled the land so much that when the wind began to blow and they did have a drought, it just turned into, there's still places up in the panhandle of Oklahoma where that red sand piles up 3 or 4 feet high every year when the winds blow, because it's still desolate.
By the way, the middle of the world was called the Golden Fertile Crescent, the Tigris Euphrates, and that's where the Garden of Eden was. With except for a few small strips here and there, that place looks like desert mess.
Exactly.
And I think the last 5,000 years or whatever, 6,000 years of human history, they've ruined that land.
Yeah.
Used to be the Fertile Crescent. It's now, you've seen pictures of Iraq. You know what I mean?
It's almost uninhabitable. I mean, with the exception of an oasis here and there, it's desert. There's no trees, no grass, no nothing.
By the way,
for miles and miles that way.
Israel had laws that even in war, you couldn't cut down fruit trees, to build battering rams. In war, you had to leave the fruit trees there because they were useful. In other words, you're supposed to guard the land. And can you see that mankind in general has not guarded the land?
Yeah.
And that's what the land Sabbath law and the laws about not cutting down certain trees were about.
Yeah. How do
You know,
you
this
make
gets
money from
into
it?
it.
They have
Sorry.
I'm sorry. Not if they can make money from stripping the land,
This is
Like,
kind of
look at the trees. We're doing better about tree replanting now, but back when they just cut them down like crazy. Look at the rainforest in Brazil. What's going on down there?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's probably complicated, but still people need to take care of the land, and the land Sabbath was part of it. Ken, would you read Exodus 23:10, please?
6 years you shall sow your land and gather its produce. But the 7th year you shall let it rest, that the poor of your people may eat, and what they leave the beasts of the field may eat. In like manner you shall do with your vineyard and your olive grove. 6 days you shall do your work, and on the 7th day you shall rest.
And really, the more you read, you can see he's almost in kind of the two are being wrapped together. The weekly Sabbath and the yearly land Sabbath, they're both good for us.
And the smaller farmers will do things like this where the corporate farms won't do it. They'll pump in everything chemical wise they can to try and get the minerals back up so they can get some yield out of them crops. But and then they want to take as much of the farms away from the family farmers and give them to the corporate.
I read something this week too about the concern about honeybees, the decline of the honeybee, which is so important for pollination of all of these plants. And because of the sprays and things that we put out on these plants, there's a great concern that there could be a reduction. And I don't know, they've been talking about this since the 70s. First time I heard it was probably in the 70s about the bees, but it is such a a very critical part and a very sensitive area in our the growth of plants that it can be damaged very easily, and it would certainly be devastating if that happened.
There's individuals that make a living by loading up beehives on 18-wheeler flatbeds and driving them out to California in their their orange groves and whatever else they have,
Yep.
dates and avocados and so forth like that when it's necessary, and turn those bees loose so they'll have enough bees out there to propagate their thing. Makes a huge difference, in their production.
By the way-
They're not there all the time,
Yeah, bees are definitely a necessary part of the whole process, and if you ever did pull them out, the whole planet would starve to death. I mean, but I don't know that I don't know that they actually ever found that the population is reducing or not. But I question everything that comes from the media. I'm very speculative. They always want to scare us into something because before you know it, they'll blame it on global warming and try to get everybody scared that way. So who knows?
Yeah, you can't trust them.
I knew the one thing
about-
that is dangerous is when there's a scientist down in South America that got a hold of the bees, and he bred them with some African African bee to try and make them stronger, and then he created an Africanized honeybee, and that is a problem. That is a real mess and a menace all throughout the South.
And it escaped from the lab.
Yeah,
like in all the sci-fi movies, the super dangerous thing. Well, we'll keep it in the lab like Wuhan. It gets out. But one good thing I heard about the big beautiful bill was they got rid of most of the death tax. So farmers couldn't pass their farms to their kids to pay the taxes. They have to sell them to corporations. And the more the corporations control farmland, they're less concerned about not overusing pesticides, fertilizers, etc. The more family farms you have, theoretically, the better natural farming, where you might have an environment that would be healthy for the bees. One thing I have noticed, about 15 years ago, we had more bumblebees in our flowers in the front, and then I hadn't seen any. This year, for the first time, I remember with Carl, we saw 2 or 3 bumblebees in front of my house working the flowers. Now you're going to say, what's the big deal? But I hadn't seen them, as if the bumblebees are slowly making a comeback. But I still think it's a problem.
Yeah.
Depends on where you are, of course.
I'll tell you what, we don't have a
shortage. I
shortage
still think they
of...
may be overusing the pesticides.
Yeah, we don't have a shortage of carpenter bees or whatever, or whatever you call the things. They're all over the place.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, there's some wild bees. I did an experiment. There are wild bees out there, and the ones we need are the ones we got.
Yeah.
Like weeds. There's never a shortage.
The other things that I was thinking about is, the distribution of resources, with these big corporations, like with the chickens or something, they have a disease. It wipes out the whole chicken population, for several states, because they're all in close proximity. They got trucks going back and forth to each of these houses, where they raise chickens for consumption. But, when it was all in the hands of local farmers, if someone had an outbreak, it was sort of, it
was localized.
Localized there. And then the other people around the country or the county or whatever could sort of fill in the gap, and it would just be contained. But, now with this, like feedlots for cattle, they get a disease, and all the cattle get diseases, and the communication between them is almost impossible to control.
My dad's always had chickens and pigeons his whole life, and there was something that went around in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah,
somewhere in that time frame that was taking out chicken flocks all over up here, and he had to call the chickens we had because they'd get it. He'd separate them out from the healthy and the sick, and he'd have to call the sick ones. But he got to be real good at saving chickens and getting them back up, and he got to be real good at that.
Well, congratulations.
Well, he could have wrote, if he was alive today, he would have his own channel on YouTube on how to take care of birds, and we could just make a fortune off what he knew. He knew everything. There's nothing he couldn't tell you about a chicken or a bird or of any kind.
Now,
Well,
Rick, kind of to your point, we've probably all heard like third and fourth generation farmers and ranchers talking about how they take care of the land because it's an asset. They have to keep it maintained because
Yeah.
their kids are going to take it. It's an asset. You don't let it disintegrate, where big companies, as you say, just buy more chemicals.
yeah, we need more family farms and less gigantic corporate farms.
Mm-hmm.
I hope we start getting more of that with the new big beautiful bill, but it'll take time. Ken, did we read Exodus 32:10 yet?
Oh, I don't remember.
I don't think we did.
Right now we're on Leviticus 25:2. We read Exodus.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
did you read Exodus 23:10 already?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I still believe resting the land allows it to replenish itself. That's the point we want to make. And all the stalks and stuff, just let them fall down to the ground and just, I guess, rot or whatever the appropriate term is and become soil. Decompose, yeah. That's, I think, what's meant by it, the land Sabbath. Now we want to talk about the Jubilee year because it is related. Would you read Leviticus 25:2, please, Ken?
The land which I give you, then the land shall keep a Sabbath to the Lord. 6 years you shall sow your field, and 6 years you shall prune your vineyard and gather its fruit. But the seventh year there shall be a Sabbath of solemn rest for the land, and a Sabbath to the Lord. You shall neither sow your field nor prune your vineyard. What grows in its own accord of your harvest you shall not reap, nor gather the grapes of your untended vine, for it's a year of rest for the land, and the Sabbath produced the land shall be a food for you, your male and female servants, your hired man, and the stranger.
So rest for the farmer. Would you go ahead and read Leviticus 25:8, please?
Oh, you wanted me to skip that one. Sorry. And you shall count 7 Sabbaths of years for yourself, 7 times 7, and the time of the 7th Sabbath of years you shall be to you 49 years. Then you shall cause the trumpet of the Jubilee to sound on the 10th day of the 7th month, on the day of atonement. You shall make the trumpet to sound throughout all your land.
In other words, atonement's the day of forgiveness. Well, it's also the day of forgiveness as far as land. For instance, if you lost your land in bad business deals, it went back to the original family regardless of how bad your debt management was. And you realize what a blessing that was, because in most of the world, you had these big land barons who over time had big land, but a lot of poor peasants that worked the land. Where in Israel, every 50 years, everything would balance back out.
No long-term loans, no basically a slave to the state or to the banks and everybody else.
Well, they preserved the family. They preserved the tribes that were there. They preserved the genealogy of those families. Even during Jesus' day and David's day, they could recite their genealogy all the way back to Adam. They wasn't a big amalgamated or conglomerate of people that just it turned into a melting pot of different peoples and between the races and between the tribes that existed then. But the Day of Atonement, I think, is critically important. That day was a time of reconciliation back to God of His people. It was a time of reconciliation, and when you think about a nation that would allow for prisoners to be released, captives were to let go, the slaves were given freedom, the forgiveness of debt, the returning of land back to the original families. On the Day of Atonement, they blew the trumpet and that word actually, Jubilee, actually means something like a musical instrument and a horn that made this great announcement. And it must have been an incredible time when you think about a whole nation whose debt had been forgiven, and they got to start over brand new with their land back. I mean, we don't even know what that would feel like to have all of your debts forgiven, and you get the land back that your great great grandfather had, and you get to go start over again. I mean, what a new beginning for you.
It blessed Israel a lot. They didn't have a bunch of peasants and overlords. Would you read verse 10, please?
And you shall consecrate the 50th year and proclaim liberty throughout all the land to all its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee for you, and each of you shall return to his possession, and each of you shall return to his family. That 50th year shall be a jubilee to you. In it you shall neither sow nor reap what grows of its own accord, nor gather the grapes of your vineyard, gather the grapes of your untended vine. For it is the Jubilee. It shall be holy to you, and you shall eat its produce from the field. In this year of Jubilee, each of you shall return to his possession.
And would you go ahead and read the next one, the last scripture, 25:20. Then we'll discuss it.
And if you say, what shall we eat in the 7th year? Shall we not sow nor gather in our produce? Or since we shall not sow nor gather in our produce, then I will command my blessing on you in the 6th year, and it will bring forth produce enough for 3 years. And you shall sow in the 8th year and eat old produce until the 9th year, until its produce comes in. You shall eat of the old harvest. The land shall not be sold permanently, for the land is mine, for you are strangers and sojourners with me.
This is the same kind of miracle that God did with manna in the wilderness. Well, he reinforced the weekly Sabbath by producing more manna that wouldn't spoil for the Sabbath. And now he's going to produce more crops so they can get through the land Sabbath, and they just walk out in their field and eat what grows on its own without a big planting or big harvest. It's a miracle. And anyway, let's discuss the last thing. I believe that we can't do that because we're not a theocracy, and that we don't have family land, and you can't just cancel debts anymore. But wouldn't you agree that God wants us to live by the principle as much as we can, right?
Yeah. Plus, once Christ returns, everything's reverting back to this. These rules, these principles. Might as well learn what they are now.
Yeah. They're going to be the rules and the laws for the kingdom of God.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Because for at least a while, we'll still be physical. I mean, we won't be physical, but there'll be a lot of physical people still on the earth growing physical crops.
Right.
Yep.
And what more can you imagine the size of the economy of a nation where everyone's working, everyone has their own land, everyone is producing something, and that, like you said, there's not these big land barons that have all the land and everybody else is in a poor state because they don't have any land to produce, but just the collective productivity of a nation that had everyone working on their own piece of land, making something, producing something, growing something, would be unbelievable. I mean, it just would be fascinating. We all wish it was like that again, because to drive into these little bitty towns and have different culture, different art, different crops, different things that you could witness and experience. Like something like a farmer's market. How much we love those, because everybody brings something there that's unique and great and good. And it's I've got a friend in the church that lives up in Nova Scotia, I believe, and yes, and he grows pumpkins up there that weigh 1,000 pounds, over 1,000
Wow.
pounds, and he's just started his crop of pumpkins. I emailed him the other day, and we can't grow. I can't grow those here, unless I did it artificially. But he has greenhouses up there, and the climate is great for it. But to have that kind of unique culture in crops and growing things would be fabulous to experience.
I got to think the growing season in Nova Scotia is rather short.
Mhm.
How you're getting 1,000-pound pumpkin out of a short growing season's got to be some kind of very interesting stuff he's doing up there. I'm sure it likes the cooler weather and all that, but
survive. There are some crops that can survive a cold fall. Would a big pumpkin be one? I'm just asking the question.
Obviously, there's something up there that is very. Maybe it's the light. I don't know. The longer days,
It's kind of like Alaska.
Yeah.
Alaska has these horrible winter times, but they have the most beautiful crops in the springtime because the soil is so fertile. And he starts these pumpkins out in the greenhouses, though, even when it's really cold. But anyway, they're getting a lot of rain up there right now. Last time I talked to him, and he's wanting some sunshine. I told him you're getting the rain we had a couple weeks ago.
The only principle I can get out of it is that we should not do anything to oppress the poor. That was the principle of the law. If you have any power over money or other people, don't do anything to oppress the poor. I guess now we're ready for our prophecy watch.
All right? Here we go.
I want to.
How'd you like that one?
By the way, I want to encourage people, we should have said at the beginning of the program, to stay toward the end, because we want to try to have more interesting prophecy watches. And I'm admitting it's speculation, because watching world affairs is speculative. Things can change suddenly, but I still think there's an advantage in watching it. So when the right things happen, you'll say, aha, that's what Daniel meant, or whatever it is. But so the big question is it treason, and will that be a big shakeup in the American government, or will it just be ignored?
What?
Someone asked me that today, and here's my opinion. Maybe they get Comey, maybe they get Brennan, and maybe some lower level, but I don't see them hauling in Obama or Hillary, even though it'd feel real good to see that happen. But they might get some lower level people. They might let them go.
That the whole thing was Hillary's idea.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. I don't. They definitely won't touch Obama, but they might. I don't think they'll touch her either. But they might, like I said, get some of these other guys.
So I don't know if it's going to change the world, but it's like you can no longer trust the intelligence services. And there are now rumors that our intelligence services may have had something to do with Kennedy's assassination, MLK. I'm not saying they did or they didn't, but can you see the trust of the public on our own intelligence is dropping?
Oh, it has.
And that may be a factor in the future.
Yeah, it's been dropping for quite a while. With good, there was good reason for it. I mean, some of the things they've been caught doing. I mean, especially this Russia Gate. What they did was, it's unconscionable.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there.
And does this weaken the status of America in the world? I'm not saying it does or doesn't. I'm just asking the question.
Someone said something in the chat room about the auto pen pardons, and I'm pretty sure the reason that Hunter went on that little tirade he did the other day, trying to say his dad was just on Ambien, but he was okay other than that, was to secure these auto pen pardons and making sure that everybody knows that Biden was fine when he gave his son a pardon. You know what I mean? He was just protecting his own backside. I'm pretty sure that was the reason he went online. Oh, Dad was fine. All these people were nuts. He just on Ambien. Don't take the pardons away because I don't want to go to the Huskow.
By the way, his pardon was the only one that was handwritten, I heard.
Oh, really? He was
Really?
All the
probably
rest
holding
were
his
auto
dad's
pen.
hand when he did. It makes Watergate look like like someone stole their lunch. You know, I mean, this was
Yeah.
You know,
Exactly.
if they don't go down for this, these people, then they all owe Nixon an apology. I mean, Nixon did nothing compared to this.
There's one more issue, world trade. It would appear that America is gaining in getting fair trade deals than we had before. Assuming that that holds up, I realize the big one is still Europe and China is slippery. So I can see both those things, but even still, if it keeps going the way it's going, it looks like America will be stronger. And I'm going to make an opinion, you know, and obviously anything is possible. But this has happened historically, like in the case of Bismarck. I'll give the example of Germany. There's a theory in Europe called the balance of power theory. One sub-theory is that when one power gets too strong, all the surrounding powers fear threatened and gang up on it. Well, when Germany united and was a big bad Germany, Bismarck was the guy that did it. Well, Bismarck was a great diplomat, et cetera, and he was able to pacify all their potential rivals. Everything went fine as long as Bismarck was in power. But once Bismarck was gone, things went downhill. I'm going to use that same principle. As long as Trump is here, I think America, even though we're the only superpower, and that theory means people should fear us and gang up on it. As long as Trump is here, I think America's okay. When Trump is gone, or like if he gets assassinated, all bets are off.
Yeah.
I know that sounds like I'm stretching the Bismarck example. There are other examples similar to that too.
Yeah.
Too far. Once you have a great leader, he can offset a lot of bad problems. But the problem is, historically, the great leader gets old, gets replaced, dies, gets assassinated, and then things suddenly change.
Yep. You know,
And
there's been a couple of things to add to the wars and rumors of wars. Thailand and Cambodia are going at it. I think is it Cambodia? Thailand, yeah, Cambodia and Thailand are going at it, and there's a couple of provinces inside of China that are going at it. The battles and it's getting really weird out there.
And
I've never heard of these countries fighting before. All of a sudden, they're at war, or they're on the precipice of going to war. So,
and you don't hear anything about it in the news. You
No.
know, we'll never hear anything about those conflicts. You know, it's all we can be, focused on is the Epstein files and, the guy that got caught with a woman at the concert over and over again. Those stories are playing, and it's almost as if it's intentional that they keep playing these stories over to cover up the things we're talking about here that may be on a par with treason of selling our secrets, AI secrets, to the Chinese. Even I was reading an article about that today. How they, the things that we have done to sell the United States up the river to these to foreign countries, has really, I think it's on a par with treason. Because
you remember when Clinton was in office, they sold technology. Was it either to China or to North Korea? I think it was
North
China.
Korea.
North
Guidance
Korea
systems.
to get their so their missiles could go further. Thanks,
Yeah.
guys.
Guidance
Now they can
system.
reach us. Clinton sold the technology to them.
By the way, you want to hear a weird theory? There's this, I won't tell you about the guy, I'll maybe get distracted. He put this on X. He says, Obama is not guilty of treason. He said, why? Because he was never patriotic or loyal to America. He might have recited the oath, but that was just required to take the office. He was never loyal. He was never patriotic. That's why he went on that apology tour. And so for him to be disloyal to America was his natural nature.
Yep.
I thought, wow, I would have never thought of that.
I wouldn't either.
But the man could be right.
Well, he is right.
As
Yeah.
far as Hillary's concerned, I don't know about her patriotism, but she's always been sneaky,
She
hasn't
just
she?
wants money and power. She couldn't care less about that. She's all about money and power. Give me money, give me power. She don't care about. I remember, I remember everything that went down during. I mean, it would take 3 or 4 hours to go through it all the stuff they pulled when he was president. It's just, it was insane how much stuff they did and sold out.
Embarrassing.
Remember
Yeah,
the
lying.
was it Chinese guys that were bringing money in to the country? What, I forget what their name was, but they were bringing cash money into the White House by the briefcases, by the baskets. It was just insane. Oh, remember when what was it? Gore went to visit the monks, and the monks donated these like millions of dollars to the Democrat. These guys that took a vow of poverty all of a sudden donated millions of dollars to the Democrat Party, to the Clinton campaign. They're just laundering money through these people. That's insane.
Yeah.
You remember how we felt before Trump got elected, that this country was on a downward path, maybe over the edge? Okay, Trump's in. We like to think things are getting better, slowing down. But I think Dr. Richard, that guy's probably right. When he's gone, these same people are going to be around. They're voting. 49% of the people vote for that kind of stuff. And we keep seeing every place we look, in every government agency, it's just jammed full of the wrong kind of people.
Marxists never give up. Marxists never stop. They never give up. You can't reason with them. You can't negotiate with them. The only thing you can do is defeat them. And but they never give up. So eventually,
that's what Rush Limbaugh said. You're quoting Rush Limbaugh.
Put him in jail. Russia put him in jail.
You can't do anything.
One thing
is,
I do hope that some of them go to jail. It might slow them down. Here's what I think: even if we get a conservative to replace Trump, there's something about a charismatic global leader that's hard to replace. I'm not putting J.D. Vance or our Secretary of State Rubio or there are a couple other major Republican candidates down. Can't think of all their names. And I'm not saying they aren't conservative, but I don't think they're going to be another Donald Trump.
They don't have that rough edge that Trump's got.
No. And he has a certain bold courage that I didn't really appreciate until lately. I think he has more courage, and I think a lot of world bad guys are afraid of him. But I don't think that's going to apply to whoever replaces him. So I think that our long-term future could be very good, but I wouldn't be betting money on it. I mean, I hope it is, but I wouldn't bet money on it.
Yeah.
Hope I hadn't discouraged you all.
No,
I'm not feeling like real positive about it.
I like your description, bold courage, but the other thing I might add to it, he had because of his business savvy and his upbringing, he has a confidence about him in what he does and says that he can back it up. And most people in politics can talk the talk, but they can't really, they can't really follow through with it because they don't have the power, they don't have the money, they don't have the energy, the resources, the people the political connections. And yet here he does, and he doesn't seem to be, abusive with it when it comes to the American people. I mean, he seems to be legitimately on the side of the American people. At least he claims to be that way. And I sincerely hope that he is. The Bible talks about when a righteous king is in power, and I'm not saying he's a king, and I'm not saying he's necessarily a righteous man. But when someone has those qualities, the people thrive and they live in peace. And you're right. When that power or that person or that figure is not there, there will be a power vacuum, and there will be anything. All bets are off, as you said, Dr. Riggs. Then someone who wants only power and only money and only greed could easily take that position, and we could be along for a very uncomfortable ride.
We missed it
Something
by
worse
that
than-
much.
Yes.
Yeah,
We
that's much.
missed it
And by
that
the way,
much.
Bill Riley said in his book, I remember this well. This is back like 30 years ago. They both were still famous. They had bodyguards. They were at this big concert in, I think, Madison Square Garden. They were in a safe box up high. And Trump likes to mingle with people. Bill Riley said, but it's dangerous out there. Let's stay here with our bodyguards. Trump insisted, and he and Bill, they took 2 bodyguards with them, but he said he likes mingling with people, likes talking to people. Do you realize a man like that is more vulnerable?
Mhm.
And I've watched him over the years, even though he knows people are out to assassinate him, he still likes to mingle with the people.
Yeah.
And that's, if I were the Secret Service, I'd say, you're hard to guard because you should stay in safe places. You know what I mean, don't you? Safe boxes and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And you'll see him go to a stadium full of 100,000 football fans and be walking around.
Yeah.
I mean, there are a few guards around, but you know what I'm saying.
He's out in the
A lot
open
of
when he
bad
goes-
things could happen.
When he goes to them MMA things, he's dead out in the open. I mean, there
Yeah,
is
he
no,
is.
Yeah.
there's nothing. It's just him and all them MMA people. Now, the chances of somebody getting by all them fighters is slim and none. But you never know. You know.
Unscathed.
Yeah, I'm just saying he likes people too much, and I'm, you know how I mean that. He likes the crowd. He likes to mingle, shake hands, and that's not really a safe thing to do. There are a lot of crazy people in this world.
He just don't care.
Anyway, I know that's a sad thing to end on, but just something to pray about.
Right.
So anyway, I want to thank all of you for hanging in here to the end of the program, and stay next week for Prophecy Watch. Who knows what we'll be talking about next week?
There you go. Well, I want to thank everyone for watching. Thank you, gentlemen, for being on tonight, and we'll see you all here next week. Good night,
Good night,
everybody.
everybody.
All right.
Good night.
We're happy you could make it, and so glad you are here, and hope that we've been able to make God's word more clear. Until next time, may God be with you in everything you try. But for now, till next week, we have to say goodbye.